Alright, so here's my failed attempt at making the sand stake. So I actually made two, and I sort of failed on both of them. But here's some footage of me making one. This is the ambitious plan, which was to fold it over the top, which would then create a nice flat hitting surface. I definitely underestimated how easy it would be to fold and then braze, which is like welding metal, and also how strong a hammer blow would be. So it didn't work that well, but there's a lot of footage of me attempting to do this, so I just figured I'd keep it in because, you know, might as well. So a lot of mistakes and then a lot of work to fix said mistakes, which eventually I just scrapped anyway. But the process of brazing is pretty cool. That's the main reason I kept it in. It's like welding, but without welding. So you get a torch and you heat up your aluminum really hot, and then you just melt a stick of metal, which is an alloy, and it will just stick to the aluminum, and it's actually stronger than the aluminum itself, and if done well, should be about as strong as a weld. But it's challenging, and it did work pretty well for me, but it was challenging, and you can't really. The problem I ran into is it's kind of like a one-time deal, and this is me brazing it here. You gotta braze once, then you can't go back and do more or anything because it's already been done and it'll melt it. So that's my failed attempt. So here I am actually doing something useful that I did end up keeping. I was cutting just the angle so it would stab into the sand easier. I just did 45 degrees, seemed like an easy way to do it. I cut it all with a hacksaw. It's really not hard to cut aluminum with a hacksaw. So that's just the pointy bit, so to speak. You can see I didn't make it an exact point with the tip because, one, I don't want it to be super sharp because it's going on an inflatable boat, and two, just the way the angle was, I didn't think that would work very well, so I just offset it by about, I don't know, 1/6 to 1/4 of an inch. I cleaned it up with the angle grinder, flapper disc, I believe. It's not necessary that you have that. You could do it pretty easily with a file or some sturdy sandpaper. I was just really making sure I rounded off all the bits that could potentially be sharp. I then filed it a little bit and then sanded it with some nice Scotch-Brite to really make sure it was soft. And that part actually worked really well. That was the only part that was really a success on this first pair. So you can see there's my first finished pair. I don't really want to call them finished, but they look pretty finished. I have the carabiner through the carabiner hole. That's how the construction was supposed to look, and then with the joints brazed. This proved not to work. Alright, so here we have the one I actually took on a river trip, and it held up, sort of. The brazing held up well, the aluminum did not. It just wasn't strong enough to hold itself out at that angle. So here's the upgraded model where I just basically cut a notch out almost like a tent stake, and that proved to be way stronger, way better. So I'm just cutting the top off of this old one and doing the same. It again, real easy, just cut it with the hacksaw. There's the new pattern, at least what I planned on, and I ended up executing it pretty well. It was tough to cut with the hacksaw, but it could be done. I ended up making it way too small, as you can probably see here though. So here's the test. First the narrow one. So it's important to get that angle, where it angles away from the raft. Where I'm standing is where the raft would be. Drove quite well into the sand. And then I got a little greedy here, and you can see it started to bend right at the end there. And that was what I was worried about, but incredibly strong. I was pulling way harder than your raft ever should pull on it, and it was barely budging at all. So pretty much a success, but not entirely. And now here's the other one. Again, same angle, and this one way thicker, so I could really wail on this one without worrying about whether it would bend or not, just because it's nearly twice as thick and only for that little bit. So I also thought it might be interesting to compact the soil around it, or the sand, it's not really soil, see what happens there. So I did that, and I think it did help a little bit. Again, pulling as hard as I can. Moves a little bit, but that's because it was right next to the old one. Strong as can be. So there's a detail of the bend. It was a real bummer that it, so it's pretty much really easy to make a sand stake. You could easily buy one too, but you can get two for the price of one, or in some cases even like four for the price of one, depending on how you go about it. Really easy. It's a project that's worth doing if you don't want to pay like $50 for a piece of aluminum.